Hello, everybody. Dennis Prager here. My more or less weekly update with Sebastian Gorka, intelligence analyst, deputy assistant to the president, and member of the National Security Advisory Staff. How are you, my friend Sebastian Gorka?
Living the dream, Dennis.
That's a good answer. You are living the dream. That's exactly right. No, I love that answer. I totally resonate to it. That's how I feel about my own life. So,
go ahead.
Yeah, I got a few things that I want to deal with here. I know that totally understandably you are in part, when interviewed, a spokesman for this administration. So I appreciate that fact. But to the extent that you can just remove yourself from that, I have two questions about the defeat of ISIS, essentially, in Iraq. One is it defeated? Number two, what responsibility would you give to the administration, the Trump administration, for this defeat? Or was it more or less inevitable?
Oh, not at all inevitable. If you look at what happened under the last administration, we ended up with a global jihadist organization that not only had established the first physical caliphate since its original dissolution in 1924, but which had more than 6 million people on its territory, was running oil refineries, had slave markets actually operating in the 21st century. So, no, it wasn't a foregone conclusion that there would be triumph in Mosul. But to answer your first question, ISIS, this is the important thing to take home after recent events, is that the physical caliphate is no more. With the liberation of Mosul, where Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi declared the reestablishment of the Islamic State in the summer of 2014, it's gone. It ceases to exist, and they're just running from safe house to safe house. So they're not defeated yet, but taking back the second biggest city in Iraq is a historic moment that announced the death knell of the Islamic State. So
how do you look at this and the lack of attention being paid to it by the American media?
Well, that's a longer discussion. Let me share some inside baseball. So, I'm delighted to work for Steve Bannon, the chief strategist on national security issues, but I also do media such as this interview with you. And in the last 3 days, we keep getting requests for me to talk to, cable stations, CNN and others, on Anthony Scaramucci's departure. And my response is not interested. We have a second...
Right, I'm not interested either.
Right. We have a second ballistic missile launch by North Korea.
Yes.
We have the 27th record-breaking stock market result this week.
Right.
We have new immigration measures. We have 900,000 jobs created.
Right.
We have a ceasefire in Syria. And the American people don't want to hear about a personnel change in the White House.
Right.
Why does the media want to hear about it? Because they live in the Acela corridor bubble. They're isolated from America, and they really, Dennis, let's be honest, they really don't understand what happened on November the 8th. They have no idea why America chose a business...
Well, they not only have no idea, many of them, and I know this for a fact, I have asked them, many of them don't know anyone who voted for the president.
Yes, it was that famous line back in the 70s. Some leading columnist said, in the New York Times, and how did Nixon win? Because I've never met anybody who voted for him.
That's exactly
right.
That's
all you need to know.
Yeah,
that's all you need to know.
All right,
but Dennis,
yep.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure.
I knew we were on the right path when I did a lot of work with the military, traveling the country, giving lectures on jihadi ideology. And last fall, you get out of the New York-Washington axis, and you drive across the country, and the only yard signs we ever saw were Trump yard signs.
That's right.
So ignore the polling, look at reality, and it's not what you would see when you switch on CNN or MSNBC.
Correct. All right, so now back to the second part of my question. What, if you can answer this, what did this administration do with regard to ISIS that would not have been done under a Hillary Clinton administration?
Great question. So firstly, we're very clear about what the military does for America and how we trust them. That think about the Moab. The president decided on the 59 cruise missile launch in Syria. That was his decision. But if you look at Afghanistan, for example, the dropping of a 21,000-pound Moab bomb on that ISIS stronghold in Afghanistan, that wasn't a White House decision. We don't micromanage to that level. That was the theater commander's decision. We are allowing our military to do the job they have been paid to do and trained to do because this administration trusts them. So number one, we trust our military and we let them do their job. Secondly, we're very explicit about our philosophical approach to these threats. We're not going to hide in a cave and ignore them, like the last administration, nor, like the Bush administration, are we going to say it is our job to defeat groups like ISIS in other people's countries. What we're going to do is we're going to find local partners, like the Iraqis.
All right, hold on there, because this answer was terrific. You really did answer my question, and it's important that everybody heard it. We'll review with Sebastian Gorka at the White House. I'm Dennis Prager. Hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. Very important dialogue I'm having with Sebastian Gorka, Deputy Assistant to the President, and it's a real big deal that I have this weekly access to a man so high up in the administration, and I'm very appreciative of his candor. I just want to emphasize something. Forgive me a moment, Sebastian, if you would.
Mm-hmm.
I have a lot of disdain for my vocation. Not my vocation, but the people in my vocation. Not all by any means. You hit on something that is so dear to me. And I know you know me, and I'm honored by that. But you have no idea. When I tune in on any of the cable channels, and all I hear is talk about Scaramucci being fired, first I turn it off. Because the importance of the Scaramucci firing, if you listed 1,000 items, it would be 900 something. And you mentioned that exact sentiment, and I was just sitting here, and I bit my lip lest I interfere with what you were saying, intervene, because I so resonate to it. I get angry, as you can hear. We in the media, we have the honor of talking to the American people, of delivering what should be significant. Yes. And first, to think of the last year virtually saturated with the drivel of the collusion story, the spectacular idiocy of it all. And then is Scaramucci in and who's out? North Korea is developing ICBMs with nuclear-tipped weapons, and we're talking Scaramucci. And how many Americans even know? And I'd like you to address this. How many Americans know how many bomb threats, Islamist bomb threats, that Australians have stopped in the last couple of years, including last week, to bring down an entire plane?
Yeah, look, let's look at the facts. A recent survey said that 93 or 92% of CNN's coverage in the last few months was attacking the president. Not 60%, not 70%, more than 90%. You cannot, I challenge any one of your listeners to switch on CNN or MSNBC and count the seconds out until Russia or Scaramucci is mentioned. You won't get to 10 unless it's a commercial break. It's just an Alice in Wonderland, Dali-esque painting. The idea that, let's just go, we're all kids of the Cold War, you and I. We now have national cable channels in America that are publicly owned that talk more about Russia than Pravda did during the Cold War. They talk more about Russia than they do about America. But they don't realize how that is viewed by the average American. And that's why, as I said in an interview with, Anderson Cooper, and, I think he took it the wrong way, CNN now ranks at the 13th place nationally for polling position amongst cable viewers. And it's 2 places behind Nick at Night, TV shows for children, and cartoons. The market will sort it out. And in the meantime, let's talk about real issues like North Korea, the economy, the legal immigration, sanctuary cities, the stock market, 900,000 jobs created. You know, I became an American because I believe in eternal values this nation was founded upon, but also because deep down, what are Americans? If you get outside of the bubble, they are driven by common sense. The media has lost all understanding of common sense.
Well, in part, that's because they all attended graduate school. So that I mean that. I know it sounds funny, but I do actually mean it literally. So anyway, let's go to Korea for a second. I will say I've not said this yet. I'm debating, but I owe it to my listeners to give my thoughts on just about everything significant. I believe in warring against evil. That is, I do believe in that. Having said that, Seoul would be destroyed in a war. The city of Seoul could not survive. It's 30 miles from the DMZ. Outside of pressuring China, I don't know what realistically can be done. So respond, please.
So, number one, you're absolutely right. This administration is prepared to use words such as evil, whether it's the dictatorial regime in Venezuela or whether it's North Korea or whether it's ISIS. We believe that there is objective truth, there's objective good, and there's evil. We have to stand up to evil, not simply when it is a threat to us directly, but when it threatens others, including our friends. What we're going to do, I really cannot go into details, but what this administration follows is we jettison the idea that it's either peace or war. Remember, that was the argument of the Obama administration with Iran. Either we sign the JCPOA-Iran deal or we have to go to war with Iran. That's a kindergarten understanding of strategy. There are many, many options we have, short of war, covert and overt, and the president will apply them as he deems necessary because he has been explicit. China has not stood up to their plate, has not done what we expected after the Mar-a-Lago summit, and we are taking no options off the table.
Well, it sounds entirely right to me. And the word covert, which obviously you can't say a word about, is a very important word to have heard. All right, look, I could spend all 3 hours with you, but you have to save the country. So, sir, I thank you on behalf of all of my listeners.
God bless and bless all your listeners. Thank you so much, Dennis.
Thank you, Sebastian Gorka. Deputy Assistant to the President, member of the National Security Advisory Staff. It really is something. Do you know if I ask you a year from now who was Anthony Scaramucci, you won't know? Do you know how much you're bathed in drivel? It's very sad. I've always known this. We'll be back in a moment. The left and the environmentalists hate your car and everything it stands for, like personal freedom. Renowned car expert Lauren Fix explains why in the latest video from Prager University. See it at prageru.com, where we teach what isn't taught. Well, hi, everybody. Dennis Prager here. It's a delight to have Speaker Newt Gingrich on the line with me. The irony here, Mr. Speaker, is we could have been live. I just spoke this morning to YAF at 9 a.m., and you spoke at 10 a.m. Did you know that?
I didn't realize we were back-to-back.
Yeah.
It's always a good group, though.
I love them. I was with them last year, and I think we were back-to-back. We're sort of a tag team here, but it would have been great to have you in studio. I'm actually 20 minutes away, though, at the Hillsdale terrific radio studio they have. Anyway, it's a delight to have you on. Everybody knows you. You're one of those who doesn't need an introduction, but for those who are not aware of the fact, he has just written a book, and it's an important book, Understanding Trump. I need to tell you something, because and everybody who listens to me knows this. I don't patronize anybody. But when you're on and I'm watching, and my wife and I both believe you are as clear as it gets. You are honest and you are clear about what is happening. You are not easily frazzled, and I needed to compliment you in that regard.
Thank you.
I'm not even asking anything from you. Okay, so you really know it's genuine.
Listen, I appreciate that. That's very flattering, because you're one of the most intellectual people on talk radio.
Well, I appreciate that very much. I know you've quoted my Civil War a few times. People have told me, and I've heard it, and I'm very, very touched. Anyway, let's get to your book, and let's get to understanding this. So I guess the most obvious question is, could you have written this book a year earlier? In other words, have you learned an immense amount about Donald Trump in the last year?
Oh, sure. I mean, first of all, you had to live through the campaign. You had to see how he would deal with adversity, deal with bad luck, deal with embarrassment. You had to watch his style change and the way he thought strategically, which was very different when he was dealing, say, with Jeb Bush versus dealing with Hillary. And then I think you had to watch him during the transition, both the clarity, and this is where I quoted you about the cultural civil war we're in, the clarity of his, for his inaugural, which Alan Guelzo, the Civil War historian at Gettysburg College, has written, was remarkably like Lincoln's first inaugural. And the reception to it in left-wing media was very much like the South Carolina pro-slavery newspapers' reaction to Lincoln. Guelzo's written some very interesting parallels about these two guys. So I think it was the process of watching how he filled out his cabinet, watching the way he began his administration. Clearly he has a lot to learn. I mean, I think he is smart, and I think he will learn, but I think that there are parts of the system that aren't obvious, and that it takes a while to figure out how they work.
So let me ask you this, this is one of these questions, I have no idea how you'll answer it. Let us say tomorrow he said, I am no longer tweeting. Would that be a net gain or loss for him?
Oh, I think it'd be a net loss. I think he has invented a medium of communication which does for him what the fireside chats did for FDR. He sets the tone, he dominates the media, he communicates directly with his base. Now, I've told him directly, I think 10% less Trump would be 100% more effective. So if you were to ask me, do I think maybe they could edit occasionally? I think that would be good.
Right.
Because I do think some of them are
okay, so that leads to the obvious next question, and that is there anybody he would listen to?
Well, there might be. I think he brought in General Kelly because, in fact, he does listen to General Kelly, and I think Kelly is an old enough guy, and he's a serious enough guy, 4-star general, combat experience, lost a son in Afghanistan. I mean, I think that Trump's respect for Kelly leads him to listen to Kelly differently than he would to almost anybody else.
What would you, if you were in that position, what would you have said, Donald or Mr. President, that particular statement or tweet was inadvisable? Do you have any in mind?
Well, I mean, there are a number of them. I mean, you can go all the way back to the campaign and find various examples. But I think part of it is what I would mostly do is ask him, what did he think he was going to accomplish? Look, I have great, first of all, he's always Mr. President, because if you have that title... No, I agree. It's inappropriate to ever be anything but that.
Right, I agree.
But secondly, I think I have enormous respect for him. I think much more than a lot of people would suspect, because I really do think he's very smart. I think he has a big vision for America. I think he's proven his willingness to sacrifice and work his tail off and stand courageously for what he believes in. So I'm inclined to start with the idea that he may know more of what he's doing than I do, and I'm very careful about rendering judgment. And I think that were I in a position on a regular basis, I'd be more inclined to say, what did you think you were going to accomplish with that particular tweet, and was there a smarter, more effective way to do it? And try to get him to see comparative advantage. I think what you can't do with him is take him head on you just burn out because he's very willful. I tell people all the time that you cannot teach Trump, but he can learn. If you try to teach him, he just rejects the idea that you're the teacher and he's the student. But if you set up opportunities for learning, he absorbs things very fast, and that's a real key to being able to deal with him. And I think General Kelly's proven over the last 6 months that he gets it, he knows how to do it, and I suspect he'll be pretty effective at it.
He calls the Russian collusion thing a witch hunt, and I have defended that particular description for months now. What's your take?
Well, let me say, first of all, it is a witch hunt, and I'm very bothered by the way Bob Mueller has brought together a group of gunfighter-type lawyers who are all left-wing, one of whom actually worked for the Clinton Foundation fighting Freedom of Information Act requests, which I think is sort of classically ironic.
All right, hold it there for a moment because I want to restate your book, and we've got to take a break. And it is Understanding Trump. It is up at DennisPrager.com by former Speaker Newt Gingrich. Hello, everybody. Dennis Prager here, speaking with former Speaker of the House, Newt Gingrich, current unofficial advisor to the president and best-selling author of the just-published Understanding Trump, which is important reading, and it is up at DennisPrager.com. We're talking about my agreement and your agreement with the president's characterization of the Russia collusion story as a witch hunt. So please continue.
Well, let me just say, first of all, as Andy McCarthy has pointed out in a number of columns, and McCarthy was the federal prosecutor who prosecuted the bombers in the 1993 World Trade Center bombing, there's no crime involved. I mean, we have yet to have a definition of a crime that they're investigating, and the danger that leads to is a person has the power of the government is that they're going to go out and keep looking and keep looking and keep looking until they find something, even if it has nothing to do with the original reason. So let's start with that. Second, it's totally one-sided because if you're talking about Russian influence, why aren't we talking about the $500,000 to Bill Clinton? Why aren't we talking about John Podesta, the campaign chairman's brother, being a registered agent for a Russian bank? Why aren't we talking about the millions of dollars that ended up in the Clinton Foundation, et cetera? Third, if you want to see a real scandal that the elite media is desperately trying to avoid covering, look at the Pakistani IT or information technology workers who worked for Debbie Wasserman Schultz and 22 other Democrats who have now stolen apparently millions of dollars, had access to all of the various information technology of 23 members of Congress, and had exactly the Hillary Clinton model of broken up hard drives and tried to flee the country. I mean, there's a scandal brewing there that's amazing and that's real, but you're not going to find the elite media looking at it because it doesn't fit their storyline.
I have said to my listeners now on a number of occasions that we have a national tragedy in the lowered state of the American media. Do you agree with me?
Yes, I think that it is something that will take years to recover from. I think the degree to which the elite media, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CBS, NBC, ABC, the degree to which they have sold out and become instruments of propaganda is very bad for America.
Exactly.
We need an honest, tough-minded news media.
That's right. Well, listen, I really hope we'll do a part 2 here because I want more people to read your book and to ask you more. In the meantime, congratulations. Excellent. Terrific. Thanks. Newt Gingrich's book is up at DennisPrager.com, Understanding Trump. Folks, stay tuned. I got the Ultimate Issues Hour coming up on the Dennis Prager Show. All right, my friends, Dennis Prager here. One of my ongoing passions my whole life was to read about World War II. For whatever reason, World War II holds the fascination of people more than I think any other war. I'm not entirely certain why. Maybe because it was so obvious a war of good versus evil. And the evil was so huge, both the Japanese and the German in that case. Well, unfortunately, like my father, who passed away a few years ago at 96, was in the Navy, not many people left to bear witness to World War II, but one happily that does and also knows how to write really well is Captain Jerry Yellin. And he has a book out which is up at DennisPrager.com, The Last Fighter Pilot, the true story of the final combat mission of World War II. The final combat mission, of course, in Japan. Captain Yellin, welcome to the Dennis Prager Show.
Dennis, it's an honor to be here representing the 16 million of us who served in World War II in uniform.
16 million?
Yes.
Wow. That's as close as we probably ever got, putting aside the Civil War, to a citizen army.
Well, there were more than 16 million. There were 8 million young women who were Rosie the Riveters. The population was 150 million, and 24 million of us served our country with a purity of purpose to wipe out the evil that you spoke of.
Yep. Now, when I want you to describe the specifics here, the details. When you flew missions, this was over Japan proper, or was it over?
Yes.
It was not.
No, over Japan proper.
Okay. How many were in the jet with you, or not jet? Excuse me, the plane with you?
Just one. We flew fighter planes, P-51s, 8-hour missions from Iwo Jima over Japan.
So you were the pilot, and then there was a gunner? Is that the way it works?
No, there was just one person in the airplane. We were the pilot, the navigator. We pulled the trigger on our stick to fire our guns, and everything was done manually. There was no automatic anything.
Right, but why was there no room for a second person?
Well, fighter planes are generally one-person airplanes. They were expanded into two-person airplanes later on in the years when the power was there. But the only fighter planes that we had in World War II were the P-38s, the P-39s, the P-40s, P-47s, and P-51s, and they were all single-engine. Well, the 38 was a twin-engine, but they were single-pilot airplanes, all of them.
So when you went over Japan that late in the war, you were doing that in order to do what exactly?
Well, Iwo Jima was taken by the Marines. 67,000 Marines invaded Iwo Jima on February 19th, 1945, to fight against 23,000 Japanese on 8 square miles of land, 90,000 soldiers. Iwo Jima was necessary as an emergency landing field for the B-29s that were bombing Japan from November of 44 from Guam, Saipan, and Tinian. But they had no fighter escort, and it was needed as a fighter base because we could fly the P-51s for 8 hours and 10 minutes, which is, round-trip flight with an hour over a target.
What, was there still a Japanese Air Force at this time?
Well, there was a Japanese Air Force in Japan.
There still was. It's still over, in other words, protecting the homeland.
Oh, yeah, they had 20,000, 23,000, 25,000 fighter planes ready to fight us for them if there was going to be an invasion.
The loss rate, as I understand it, at least in the European theater, was greatest in all the services among guys who flew planes. Was that the case in Japan as well?
Dennis, the B-29s suffered 30-40% casualty rates, and there's 11 or 12 guys in a B-29.
Wow.
And I personally...
All right, hold on. I want you to remember that. I got to take a break, though. My friends, Dennis Prager here, and I do want to remind you about AMAC, the conservative answer to AARP, the tremendous number of discounts you get on health items and restaurants and you name it is reason enough to join AMAC if you're 50 or over. And if you're mature. What if you're immature and 50? Because it is the Association of Mature American Citizens. So it's an issue. We know. I can't say we don't want you. I can't speak for AMAC on that. Maybe you get more mature if you join. Anyway, the place is terrific. Go to the banner for AMAC at my website. And an air raid siren.
One, be calm. Two, get under shelter. Three, don't run. Obey your air raid warden. 4,
World War II,
stay
yeah.
home.
All right, let me go back to my author here, who did fight in World War II and fought the last combat mission in the war for the United States. It was over Japan, Captain Jerry Yellin. And it's a terrific little book. It's up at DennisPrager.com. Called The Last Fighter Pilot. I was talking to you about the terrible casualty statistics from bomber pilots and fighter pilots, and I was asking you if this was as true in the Pacific as it was in Europe.
Well, I think it was much more dangerous to fly in Europe because they were closer to the enemy. We had to fly, the B-29s had to fly 1,500 miles to Japan from Saipan, Guam, and Tinian. And they had engine problems, they had anti-aircraft problems, and no place to land if they got in trouble except the sea. So, yeah, the casualty rate was as high, but it was much higher,
right?
Because the war in Europe was that.
So, let me ask you on that level. You're alone. You're being, tell me if I'm correct, you're being attacked by enemy planes, and you're being attacked by anti-aircraft flak from the ground. Is that correct?
Yes, that's partially correct. We were protecting the B-29
right.
from April 7th, 1945, until June of 1945, when Curtis LeMay came over from Europe and took over the 20th Bombing Command, and he stopped the daylight raid. And so we didn't go up to Japan escort mission after July. We went up after June of 1945. We went up on strafing missions, and we carried 8 rockets and 6 machine guns, and we went up looking for trouble, which we found a lot of. The defenses of Japan were pretty good, and we suffered a lot of casualties. I flew literally in my squadron, the 78th Fighter Squadron, the Bushmasters. 16 guys were killed. 5 guys were killed in Hawaii in training, and 11 guys were killed in combat. So we had very high casualty rates over Japan.
So how do you look at this on a personal level? Do you regard your surviving as essentially just a lot of good luck? Do you think that there was a divine providence involved? How do you deal with surviving?
You know, I've thought about that a lot, Dennis. I had three of my wingmen were killed. 2 of them off of my wing, 1 of them who took my place. And it's a factor in my life that I cannot resolve. I guess it's just plain luck of the draw. I was one of the few fighter planes that came back from Japan that didn't have bullet holes in it. Even though I shot down 3.5 airplanes and I was in combat dogfighting, my airplane never got hit. So I'm a fortunate guy and a humble guy about the fact that I survived. I'm now 93 years old. There's maybe 200,000 or 300,000 veterans World War II alive today. I think the youngest guy who served in World War II is now 89 or 90 years old. And we're not going to be around forever. We're not going to be around very long. That's why Don Brown wrote this book. That's why I'm going to be at the Nixon Library tonight speaking about my experiences. We were at the Reagan Library the night before last. It was an incredible event. And the story has to be told. And Don Brown, who wrote the book, I helped him write it a bit, but it's the final episode of World War II. And I never thought about it until Don contacted me and asked me questions about my life. So it's just incredible that so many of us served and there's so few left, and that the story of the Pacific War hasn't been told as much, and yet it was just as important because we went to war because of December 7th, 1941, when the Japanese attacked us.
When you speak, do you sense the gratitude and admiration that people like myself feel toward you? Is this the general reaction, or are people so distant from World War II that there's no reaction?
There's tremendous reaction. The audiences that I speak to are quite startled at the stories that we have to tell. I'm not speaking about myself. I'm just speaking about the war in the Pacific, which was, I think, forgotten. The war in Europe was so much more important than the war in the Pacific.
All right, hold on there. 1-8-PRAGER-776. People love to talk to people who've been in World War II. And properly so. All I keep thinking is my own dad right now. We'll be back. The book is up at DennisPrager.com, The Last Fighter Pilot. I'm Dennis Prager. Bombers that were doing their missions and, of course, get into dogfights with enemy planes, have anti-aircraft fire at them. When you were in the plane and encountering anti-aircraft fire and then pilots coming to kill you, I mean, that's what they were, just as you had to do that to them. Were you scared, or was adrenaline the only thing you felt?
The adrenaline was really the only thing we felt.
Right.
Nobody was afraid. Nobody was, when you put the uniform on of the United States of America, when the policemen put the uniform on, the firemen put the uniform on, we all dedicated our lives to protect other people. And we did that. 16 million of us did in World War II. The police do it every day. The firemen do it every day. You just dedicate yourself to the mission at hand. And nobody really was afraid to do what they had to do. The purity of purpose of war is to kill your enemy. They wanted to kill us, and we wanted to kill them. They weren't people, and we weren't people to them. We were the enemy. And you do it fearlessly. You're trained. You have a machine. You run the machine, and it's just an incredible moment in life when you're in combat.
Were you relieved when the atom bomb was dropped?
We thought the war would be over, absolutely, completely over, at that moment in time. Yes, we were very relieved.
Yeah.
We were very surprised.
It's very important. Yeah, people need to hear that. Listen, I could talk to you for hours, and I didn't know that, and I'm happy to make that knowable to those in Southern California. Tonight you'll be at the Nixon Library?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Well, you'll meet a lot of my listeners there. God bless you, sir.
Thank you so much, Dennis. I appreciate you being on your show.
That's very kind of you. It means a lot to me. You know, by the way, about the atom bomb, we have a Prager University video. This is August is fundraising month for that. We have a defense of the atom bomb given by a professor of history at Notre Dame who's also a Catholic priest. So it's a moral defense and a political defense. But you don't need more than what you just heard from the captain. He knew his life was very possibly saved because of that terrible bomb. Anyway, we need your help because we are the most powerful video force for our values in the world today, with 500 million views projected for this year.